Welcome back to the Ministry Without Hating It podcast, a ministry of Odyssey Haven coaching and counseling dedicated to the pursuit of answering the question, is it possible to do ministry without hating it? We have a theory that it just might be. We are back for another Soul Check episode, and if this is your first one with us, these episodes are usually focused on an open discussion with ministry leaders and mental health specialists focused on reinforcing the most important part of you, and that's your soul. Today, we've got our friend, fellow pastor, therapist, and founder of Church Wellco, BrianJames McMahon. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. Taking a risk to bring me back on.
Well, we've got you scheduled for 2 of these.
Yes.
So,
high risk, high reward.
That's right.
There it is. And I think it's going to be just fine. I have zero concerns about any of this.
I'm excited. I'm really excited for the topics we're talking about today.
Yes. Yeah, me too, which is going to sound funny here in just a second. We actually say what it is we're excited to be talking about. If you missed it before, we did say welcome back. Brian James joined us back in episode 38. If you have not listened to it, it's not necessarily required for this, but I highly recommend that you go back and listen to that. But he touched on a few things, and there were some things that when we were talking after, and even just now, we were like, we would love to pull that out and unpack maybe a bit deeper. And so that's what we're here doing today. And we'll be doing some others here coming up as well. But the topic that we wanted to focus on for this episode is the topic of lament.
Yes.
Which, so you say, we're excited to talk about.
Well, I am pumped to talk about lament, even though
Lament,
it doesn't feel like a word that is connected very much with excitement.
Yeah.
Fair.
No, it's not. However, as we're going to talk about here, it's actually really important, important. Back in that episode that we recorded previous, you gave a really good definition of the word lament, and you juxtaposed it against grief. And so for those maybe who missed it, or for maybe a good working definition as we're moving forward, would you just give us that definition for lament again?
Yeah. So I make the distinction with grief and lament pretty particularly, and I put them both under this umbrella of mourning, of how we mourn difficult things. And I identify grief as how we mourn something that we've lost, something that was there that isn't there anymore. There's now an absence in our lives of something that was there. And I often illustrate that when I talk about when my dad passed away a few years ago. There was a day where he was in my life and then he was no longer in my life. In the loss of something that I had, that's an experience that I grieve. The contrast to that is with lament, which is we're not grieving something we've lost, but lament is how we mourn something that never should have been, or something that should have been that never was. And there's a progressive nature, there's an injustice element to that. And even holding my loss of my dad as an example, I grieve his absence in my life, that he was there and he isn't any longer, but I lament that there were some things that I needed to receive from him as a father that I never received. There was something that was supposed to have happened in that relationship that didn't happen, and not happening caused ramifications and caused challenges and struggles in my life that had he entrusted some of those things, had he taught me some of those things, had he given me those things, my life would have been different. And so that's not something that I'm grieving because it's not something that I lost. It actually is something that was supposed to be in my life that wasn't in my life. And on the inverse of that, right, experiences like abuse or where we've experienced harm, or there's been something that has been entered into our life that has been given to us that actually should never have been. We don't grieve abuse being there. We lament that it's there because it's not supposed to be. That we don't grieve harm. We may grieve what harm robs from us, right? When we go through, have experiences of abuse and it robs us of childhood, we may grieve the loss of the childhood, but we lament the presence of something that shouldn't have been there, or we lament something that was supposed to be there that never made its way into our lives. And so in that way, I hold these two as really, really distinct. And even more so, I think I hold it distinctly in general for all people, but particularly for all the ministers that I work with. And when I think about the experiences that we have as pastors and we have as walking with people, and when I sit with a pastor, the easiest way I explain it is the first time you have a family leave your church. someone you've invested in and you've cared about and you've walked with, and you have imagination for where the relationship is going to go and all the things that you can do. And you get an email from them that said, hey, just not for us, we're out.
Yeah.
The first time you get that, you grieve it because there was something that was there that has been lost. There's a relationship that it was and is no longer. There's an absence in the community. But the 5th time you get that email, the 10th time you have that conversation, the 15th time someone's tapping out and walking away, we're not grieving that anymore. We're actually acknowledging I'm in a system, I'm in an experience that isn't how it's supposed to be. I am regularly going through experiences that are painful that I should not be going through because that's not God's design and God's intent. And so we don't grieve those. We actually enter into a place of lament that says, this hurts in a way that isn't God's design. I don't grieve its loss. I lament that I'm trapped in this. It's ongoing. It's painful and it's difficult.
Oh, is it weird that I'm like feeling anxiety as we're starting to talk about this specific thing?
He's already triggered. He's like, well, I'll tell you what, I don't remember where I saw this, but it was within the last couple of years. There's some statistic that ministry leaders or pastors experience more relational separation in a year than most people do in a lifetime.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
that holds up in the stories and that holds up in the research. And I think we've done a good job of beginning to name that loss, right? Of actually having some room to say there's grief involved in the amount of relationships that we lose. And so I don't want to take away from our practices of grief. We need to be grieving. And in addition to grieving is this practice of actually lamenting that those experiences aren't going to stop. That experience of time and time again of grieving the loss of a relationship, the fact that weekly, monthly, quarterly, however frequently that I am grieving, that this is now part of a rhythm of life that is not intended. And so in addition to grieving the specific things that we've lost, there's an invitation for us to lament the experience that we continue to have.
Yeah. I mean, we joke around triggered, but I do anytime somebody says, hey, can I meet with you? Or do you have time to talk? You know, that instantly, that's just your reaction inside.
Yeah.
And,
what did I do this time?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. You get an email that says, hey, I need to talk to you. And you're like bracing for it.
Yeah. And then it's just like, hey, we need more napkins in the fellowship hall or something like that. Thanks for that.
Yes, I sat in that anxiety that whole time.
Yeah. Or sometimes it's exactly as bad as you thought it was going to be. And that's just fun too. So we're focusing on lament. And you've talked a little bit about how this started, or even gave an example. How has this come to be such a significant focus for you?
So for a long time, I was in contexts where pain and harm would be happening relationally, and kind of the whole underpinnings of my shift from pastor into therapy, and I think I shared this in the episode that we were on last time, was observing and experiencing harm being done in relationship and not being able to make sense of it or understand what to do. And so as I began to pay attention to places of harm and what happens in us when we experience pain, when there's betrayal, when there's violation, noticing that, and then brought around the necessity of asking the question, okay, what do we now do? And for me, there was just an insufficiency of saying, okay, I just need to sit and grieve it. I need to cry and I need to let someone go. And I do need to do those things. I do need to acknowledge the harm and shift my heart to a posture of forgiveness so I'm not building resentment towards someone else. And I need to do part of that work of grieving. But then after I would grieve and after I would acknowledge the thing that has been lost, I now orient towards my life and say, now how do I live? And how do I live in a way where I know this is going to happen again? I don't want it to happen again, but the data would say it's going to. And so I can't preemptively grieve, although sometimes I try to grieve, but if I'm preemptively grieving a relationship, I'm not actually present in it. And so in that exploration, I found myself in the Psalms a lot and reading the psalmist as he is like bemoaning the reality of his life in his lived experience, where it's like, how long, oh God, are the wicked going to prosper? And right, how long will you withhold your presence from me? And he's not talking about a moment that has been lost. He's talking about an ongoing season and an ongoing experience that he was expressing, this vocalization of lament, which really is at its core the statement that says, what I'm experiencing is not right. What I am going through is not what God intended it to be, that what I am experiencing is not the fullness of the kingdom. And because it's incomplete, because it's misaligned, because it's inaccurate, therefore it is causing me harm. And grief doesn't hold enough room for protest. Really, at the end of the day, grief is about acknowledging. But when something is perpetuated and ongoing, there needs to be some room to say, okay, I signed up for this. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to walk through this, not tapping out. Also, God, can we just acknowledge this sucks?
Yeah.
Can we just say that? And so it was really in that process of, how do I remain faithful? How do I minister without hating it? Right? To capture the whole thing. And for me, that was where I said, I don't know that we can actually sustain in ministry without hating it, unless we learn how to lament, which gives us room and permission to name what is, to acknowledge the harm that was being experienced, to not shift to blame or to take power and to take control, but to exist within a system that's problematic and dysfunctional relationally, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I love that word protest. I guess, I don't know if this is maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but I know when I protest in my heart, it does feel better, but I can also take it to a place that's also not healthy.
Like complaining or
not helpful. Yeah. Or even just, imagining a fiery car crash or something,
Well, I want to click on Brenton, what you just put out that word like complaining.
Yeah.
And I think this is a spot that in the church in particular, we get really confused because we're like, we don't want to be complainers. We don't want to ruminate and spin out just in the places of anxiety. We don't want to just have the catastrophic thinking, Chad, that you were mentioning. And I would just say, complaining is attentive to the symptoms. Lament is attentive to the pain. I am complaining about people leaving my church. I'm complaining about people criticizing me. I'm complaining about the thing that is happening, which is valid. But if we only stay at the level of the thing that is happening or not happening, and we don't allow ourselves to go deeper than that to say, what's the pain that I'm experiencing as a result of the thing that is happening? If I stay in complaint, one, I'm actually not being fully honest. I'm just criticizing circumstances. Two, it will never become useful or resolve anything. But it's actually when I allow the thing that I'm identifying as problematic, that I might start as a complaint, that I move to say, this is hurting me. This feels like betrayal. This feels like abandonment. This feels like being alone. This feels like loss. Now I can actually name the pain, and the pain is what I take to God. The pain is what I take to other people and say, this is not what we're designed for. We were designed for life and wholeness and connection and vibrancy and flourishing. And this is an experience that feels like eroding my soul, and it hurts. That's the shift. We're no longer complaining, because we're not blaming the circumstances. I'm actually getting really honest about the impact that the circumstances have on me. And my protest to God is like, God, what are you doing? And why am I still in this? I know it's not what you intended.
Interesting. I can see it, Brenton, go.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, so like, in order to do that, how self-aware do we just need to be to notice like, oh, I'm just complaining about this, to moving to that place of understanding of the difference between the two.
Yeah. And I think we all need to continue to grow in self-awareness. And that contrast is the complaining is external, the pain is internal. And so if I'm paying attention to the external things and just talking about the external things and it stays there, I'm not going to actually move to a place of lament, because I would suggest that lament holds room for hope. And I want to talk about this, and we'll maybe circle back to hope piece in this.
Yeah.
But lament holds room for hope that unacknowledged pain can't hold. And in the place of complaint, there isn't room for hope, because we're sitting in a place of criticalness, in criticism, that is external to us, that we actually often can't control, can't change, can't reorient, that it's just there. When we bring that attention back to that self-awareness that Brenton's talking about, we actually begin to go, okay, how am I experiencing this? What's this kicking up for me? What's the pain that this is connected to for me? And then for me to be able to sit with God and go, God, this feels really unfair. You know how much I hate abandonment, and you called me to be a pastor. This does not line up. And I got some questions about that. And in that place of protest and lament, because we are so honest, I would say complaint isn't fully honest, it's just partially honest. Lament is where we get fully honest. And in that place, God meets us there. We meet one another there. We can see a bigger picture. It creates some room for hope, even in the midst of the distress of the experience. But self-awareness, Brenton, I think is critical.
So how would someone begin to move? Let's say that as we're talking, they're going, oh yeah, this sounds great. How would someone begin to move in those places if that's not been a practice of their life?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think to give ourselves permission to have a couple different questions that we ask ourselves on a regular basis, right? This practice of reflection, even on our own experience, and to break apart the question of what is the circumstance that is causing the pain, and to name that, right? That I don't just wake up hurting. There's always something that causes the hurt. Right, my nose doesn't just break on its own, but it breaks because I run into a door or I get punched in the face, or right, there's something that happens that causes the pain, and the thing that happens is real. And we have to give ourselves permission to actually name the circumstance that is causing hurt. So we do start there. We just don't stay there. If we stay there, then we're going to move to complaints. We're going to move to resentment. We're going to move to all of those places. But we start there to say, what is the circumstance that's causing pain? Let me be honest about that. The next question is then to say, what's the pain inside of me as a result of that? And if we want to get honest, chances are that whatever that pain I'm experiencing is also pain that I'm really familiar with a lot of my life. Right, that when someone leaves our community, and that's kind of what we're kind of highlighting in particular, is the most chronic pain that so many ministers have, is the constant deterioration of relationships. Mm-hmm. But each of us as ministers is going to experience that differently. Like for some of us, when someone leaves or a relationship ends or criticism is leveraged, what comes in us is we feel like, once again, I'm a failure. If I had done more, I would have been able to protect this relationship. And once again, I am failing. And so I am in a chronic experience of failure. Now, another minister could go through that same experience and say, oh, see, once again, I'm in a situation I don't have any control of, and that's really unfair. And it actually is the loss of control that leaves me constantly at risk. In the absence of control is actually what is harmful. And they're not thinking of themselves as failures at all, because like, I've done my part. I've contributed all that I can. I'm not the failure. The pain is because I can't trust anybody else. And so we have some different ways that we experience this, or someone else would just sit and go, this just means I'm going to be alone forever. And that's the story of my whole life. That no one ever sticks around, and betrayal and abandonment are just my constant companion. And so to look at the circumstance, we got to start there. But the same circumstance will impact 4 ministers in 4 different ways. And so that secondary question becomes, how am I experiencing this? And some of us have that language. Some of us have done some work to be self-aware. I also think this is where having a really good counselor comes in really handy to say, man, I am getting beat up. This is hurting me, and I don't even know what to name it. I just know it hurts and I hate it, which means I am in a place of lament, of saying, I don't like this. I don't think this is God's design. I don't want it to stay. How do I sustain? Which is where we then invite someone to say, help me put a finger on what's the pain that I'm actually lamenting in this, because it may be my own powerlessness. It may be constant abandonment. It may be my senses of failure. But when I can put that finger on the pain that sits within me, now we can actually take a breath and go, oh, that makes sense why I'm lamenting this. I'm not just grieving something that's been lost, but I'm actually saying there is a chronic pain in my life that is the thorn in my side, that is the thing that keeps showing up, that is going to keep undermining me, and I'm lamenting its existence.
I have so many more questions just because of context. So
what he's really asking is, can he do a therapy session with you right now?
Yeah. No. I mean, yeah, sure. Why not? That's what these are. That's why we do this. So Chad and I can get free therapy. No, is there a place where someone could take the license? I don't like using that word. I don't know the correct word to use, but take this too far.
I think the question you're asking, and you can tell me if this doesn't nail it, but I think the question you're asking is, what's the risk in leading into lament?
Ah, yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, what's the risk?
And I think that's a really appropriate and necessary question to everything, right?
Yeah.
That everything has a risk to it. And remember when I was teaching middle schoolers how to hear the voice of God, and parents are like, this also feels risky. What if they hear other things too? And there is this thing that comes up in us that says, oh, this could go badly. Maybe we shouldn't lean in. And I would say that actually doesn't get us anywhere. We just all stay stuck longer if we don't take risks. So there is inherent risk. With lament, the risk is actually that we would complain without lamenting, but we would call complaining lamenting. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the risk, because when we don't get honest enough, we don't actually identify the thing that actually hurts. Mm-hmm. And if I can't identify the thing that actually hurts, I can't heal it. I can't restore it. I can't bring God's presence into it. Right? I think about the story of blind Bartimaeus in the Gospels, where he comes to Jesus and Jesus asks him the question, like, what do you want me to do for you? Yeah. There's this invitation that God has for us to actually identify what's the thing that's actually hurting in me, so that Jesus can meet me here. Jesus didn't ask that because Jesus didn't know. Jesus asked that because he wanted to know what Bartimaeus knew. And so the risk is that actually we wouldn't do the work ourselves, and that we would weaponize lament as a way of blaming others, as a way of criticizing circumstances, as a way of abdicating our responsibility to participate in healing. And it would actually just stay in circumstances and never make it into the heart places, which is the reality that we live in a world that is broken and fractured. And we're trying to minister in this context in a way that keeps hurting. So I would say the risk is actually we wouldn't do it, but we would say that we are.
Right. Yeah, there's the honesty, transformation is part of the process, and if we're not engaging in those areas, then we're not doing the real work of all of it.
Yeah,
which would be the benefit.
Yes, and I'll tell you, I have never had an experience where I have brought my pain into a moment with Jesus, a moment with a friend, where we sat into that place of, this is what I'm lamenting. And we lament, I say there's three reasons that we lament. We lament to get honest, we lament to protest, and we lament to hold on to hope. And I have never experienced a moment where I've actually leaned into the pain that I'm lamenting, where I've gotten honest with what it is and why it hurts, where I've given myself to protest, to say, I refuse to believe that this is God's design. I refuse to believe that this is the biggest picture. And I'm protesting that this is my lived experience. And I've never had a moment where I've gotten honest, where I've protested, and where I've held on to the hope that says, my God has to be bigger than this. There has to be a more complete story, a more beautiful picture, a kingdom of God that goes beyond this. And that's the clinging to hope that actually I can't hold to if I can't be honest that this thing can't be it. And I've never had an experience where I've gone into lament and I've been honest and I've protested and I've clung to hope, where someone has met me in that, where I don't end that moment actually more hopeful than I started, more settled in the belief that there is a God that is so much bigger than this, that sees me and that is present in me. And so the risk is actually that we wouldn't lament fully or thoroughly or deeply, which when we do, we actually find ourselves filled with hope. And this is why, I think, in some ways what the Apostle Paul is getting at when he told the Galatians, like, the law of Christ is fulfilled when you carry one another's burdens. Not when you fix the problems, not when you provide the solutions, not even when you get people saved. Like, the law of Christ is fulfilled when you carry one another's burdens. And there's something in lament that actually gives us the opportunity to lean into that communally, to hold one another's burdens in the honesty and in the protest in a way that actually stirs hope within us.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Well, you've taken us this far down the road. Why don't you tell us where do we start on this journey of exploring lament in our own lives?
I think there's a couple places that we can begin. I think for some of us, we actually can start just with some self-reflection. And I think even incorporating some daily practices of getting to the end of the day and just practicing noticing what hurt today. Where did I experience disruption? Where did I experience discomfort? Not to then go blame the things or criticize people or go complaining, but to practice acknowledging where I picked up some nicks and some bruises. Because one of the things that often prevents us from lamenting is we're not even actually paying attention to places we've experienced harm to begin with. So we don't even think to lament. And so for some of us, that first practice is going to be getting to the end of a day and saying, what nicks and bruises did I pick up today? What were conversations that I had that just didn't sit really well, that felt uncomfortable or unpleasant, or a moment that I went through? And then to then take that to that second question. So what's the circumstance that hurt? Like what hurt? But to take that then to that deeper question of what does that feel like that says about me? Or what's the experience that brings up in me that actually really hurts? What does that tap on inside my soul that causes me harm? And so for some of us, that next step is simply that practice of reflection. And for those that might benefit from having a little bit guided, I think there's some great spiritual practices. There's some great Ignatian practices for those who lean a little bit on the spiritual direction side of things, of just how do we reflect on our own day, take an inventory of sorts. At Church Wilco, we use the slow journal, which is one of our rhythms of practice where we actually take time to say, where am I? What's hurting? We lean into that lament piece. And so there's some instruction in there. There's some guidance. And so if people need a kind of a guided journal of sorts, you can get it on Amazon. It's just called the Slow Journal. That's a really great way. What I will say, regardless of whether people start with their own inventory or start with a journal or start with a counselor to say, man, I don't even know how to pay attention to what hurts and why it hurts, and you need to go find a counselor, reach out to me, churchwell.co. We can connect you to some people if you're looking for that. But what I would say is, regardless of where we start, at some point we have to move lament into community. That lament is never intended and designed to be something we experience singularly. That actually for any of us to carry the weightiness of the experiences that we hold alone, that will actually destroy us. Kurt Thompson describes it really well in his book, The Deepest Place, where he talks about that all hurt starts out as pain, but pain in isolation becomes suffering. And so there's this movement to say, if we want healing and we want to lament, there's this shift back into community, because it is in the carrying of one another's burdens. And even as James would say, it's the confession of sin one to another and the prayer for each other that we experience healing. So as we would be attentive to the places of hurt, to giving permission for the honesty and the protest and the clinging to hope, we do need to bring that back into community. And this is another reason we use the slow journal, is it creates a really accessible way to say, okay, I'm going to reflect every day. I'm just going to do a slow journal entry, and I'm going to pay attention to practicing lamenting and noticing it. But then once a week, I'm going to sit down with someone else who's also doing the slow journal, and I'm going to share with you what I'm lamenting, and you're going to share with me what you're lamenting. We're going to name it, and we're going to practice holding it together. And I will promise you that if we are able to be honest with ourselves, and we bring that to a place where we can be honest with one another, that actually hope will build, that actually our burdens will be carried by one another in a way that will shift our own experience. And in this way, lament becomes an essential practice, not just personally, but in a communal context for our own sustainability and well-being, so that we could actually flourish in ministry and not shift to a spot where we're burnt out, where we're hating it, where resentment is there, when we just can no longer keep going.
Right. This might be for another episode, but finding that community of people that can hold those things well with you, is so important. We would maybe use the word safe or safer. I don't know if I love it, but yeah.
Well, and I like to tweak that, because when we probably should do a whole nother soul care episode just around safe and what that word means and where it gets misaligned. Yeah. But this is one of the things that we do at Church Wellco, where we facilitate small communities of ministers in shared context. So senior pastors in groups with each other, assisting ministers with each other, next gen leaders, to actually practice this. With a facilitator, with a guide who can help people identify how they lean in together. Because what I will tell you, and this is, we could spend a whole half hour talking about this, that safety is actually the wrong target.
Right.
Bravery is what we're after. Because if you're brave and I'm brave, we actually get safer together. And lament requires a great deal of bravery. But if I will show up with mine and you show up with yours, and some of us need to learn that in a context that is guided and facilitated. And so if there are people listening to this episode and say, I need a community to start with, visit us at churchwell.co. This is a core practice that we engage. We have guides that are facilitating groups for ministers to really learn this together.
Awesome.
BrianJames, we are so thankful for your insight into this subject. Lament is often something we as ministry leaders can be hesitant to engage in, if not avoid altogether. But this has just been so helpful, not only in destigmatizing lament, but I really think shows the benefits of lament and engaging in that. So really great. Just want to say thank you. How can leaders connect further with you or get more info on lament?
Well, it has been such a privilege to be on this, to have this conversation that clearly I care a lot about. The easiest way to get in touch with me is just through our website, churchwell.co. You can contact us directly. If email is better, just BrianJames@churchwell.co. And part of what we do is the communities. Part of what we do is individual support and care. And part of what we do is trainings for congregation and communities. And so if any of those would be useful, if there are pastors in churches say, hey, how do we help our community think about this? And we want to do a training, if we want to do some work with teams, but creating environments where we can actually lean into these conversations is just such a significant thing. So thank you for letting me come and talk about this and be on this podcast. And I look forward to where conversations might go and who might benefit from being the recipient of this conversation.
You are welcome back anytime.
Yeah, thanks again for joining us.
Well, that's it for this Soul Check episode. We have included the resources we mentioned today in the episode show notes. And on behalf of the MWH team, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.